is Laura Vargas. I'm the Director of Outreach Programs for Peer Support Community Partners, and this is Grief in the Wake, Conversations about Suicide and Substance-Related Loss, a video series where we touch briefly on topics relating to losing a loved one to suicide or substance use. Today's topic is on secondary loss.
Hi, I'm Joanna with Safety, Hope, and Healing Counseling and Consulting. And when we talk about secondary losses, it's helpful to sort of contextualize what we are meaning, what our definitions are. So grief obviously occurs after the loss of a loved one, the death of a loved one. But we also think of grief in this broader sense. And I really love the definition that was kind of coined by Jack Jordan, who is a psychologist who's retired now, who worked with suicide loss survivors for over 40 years. And he talked about grief as this whole person response to the actual or threatened loss of anything to which we are psychologically and emotionally attached. And so when we think about secondary losses, this is kind of all the stuff that happens in addition, that we lose in addition to as a result of the death, right? So sometimes we talk about that people stop showing up, right? Usually after a couple of weeks, right? They kind of drift away, and there's very often loss of relationships. Sometimes if the person who died was employed and bringing money in, there's a loss of financial stability. So there's a range of other things that are lost with that death. And very often people feel like they shouldn't be worried about that it pales in comparison in some ways to the actual death of the person, the loss of the person. And that may be true. And they are losses as well. And we know that grief is cumulative in so many ways.
Yeah. And when it comes to losing a loved one to suicide or substance-related causes, secondary loss comes up in a few unique ways. So Joanna mentioned losing family or friends. This can come up uniquely with suicide and substance-related causes when it comes to stigma. A lot of times those closest to us don't understand, might not be able to comprehend kind of the full scope of this, and might do things that make you feel like there's stigma there and like that support isn't helpful. So there's a loss of that. And in the bigger picture, community and social supports, the people that you might usually turn to for support might not be there anymore just by virtue of how this person died. And that is a significant loss and one to be grieved. There's also a loss of future plans. A lot of times when we're loving someone, caring for someone, having a relationship with someone, we have plans for the future, plans for what is to come next. And when a sudden, unexpected death happens, those are gone. And that is a loss in and of itself. There might be a loss of safety and security. We might be used to feeling that life goes a certain way. And when we have to experience the fragility of life, losing someone so suddenly and unexpectedly, that might shake up our worldview. We might not feel as stable as we did anymore. There might also be a loss of opportunities for resolution, for healing. Oftentimes, when we care for someone who's struggling with substance use or with mental health, there might be conversations that we're hoping to have with them, but we're not able to, or ways in which we're hoping that our relationships will change. And again, with that death, that is lost as well. There might also be a loss of stability when it comes to legal or logistical options. So with a sudden unexpected loss, if there are children involved, there might be custody battles that take place. There might be different legal procedures that you have to follow that you didn't before. So again, that stability, that certainty of the future that we had can all be taken away from us. And finally, there might be a loss of daily routines. If you were caring for someone who was struggling, if you were helping them out, if that became a major part of your life, maybe even an identity, that might all be lost with the death. So many different ways in which this comes up.
Yeah, and that's just naming a few. One of the things that we often hear from grievers is helpful is just to be able to identify it, right? To name it and say this too is grief, right? And it's valid and it's important to acknowledge. And then to allow yourself to feel that grief, whatever that looks like for you. Many people have many different grieving styles, but allowing space for that, allowing those feelings, whatever that is, and then thinking a little bit about what's going to be helpful. And this varies depending on what the loss is, right? So if it's a loss of relationships or social support, how do you respond to that in a different way than you might to a loss of financial stability, and thinking about what you might need around that? What is going to be helpful? What do you need to grieve, but also to recover from that secondary loss, whatever the specific thing is? And if necessary, seeking support. And there's such a broad range of supports available. And that is one thing that we are going to reiterate in every single one of these videos in these series, right? That there's not one way of grieving, there's not one way of getting support after a loss.
With peer grief support, it's available in group settings, individual settings, virtually, in person. Likewise, with professional grief support, you could find a clinician of all sorts of backgrounds, trainings, and experiences. There's also support outside of those traditional realms. There are supportive websites, social media pages, books, podcasts, all sorts of things that are worth exploring as you go through your grief journey. But we thank you for watching this video. And if there are topics that you want to make sure we cover, we'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment wherever you're watching this, or you can reach out to us if you have any questions, or again, if you have thoughts or recommendations for future topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you.